Back once again. We've got another story, and I get excited about these stories because we get to start to hear about what is going on behind the scenes, behind some of the challenges, behind some of the things that Geof here, we're working. We were talking back in the green room, and I was looking at the LinkedIn, but I didn't really get to know you. And so now we're going to get to know who you are and how things are going to work. And I'm excited. So thanks for being here. Thanks for spending time. Thanks for being able to share your little bit of your journey with us today.
No, I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here, Tim. And I just wanted to let you know that when our mutual friend Evan told me about you and the general thrust of your podcast, immediately I was like, "Holy cow! I'd really like to talk with Tim," because I really appreciate storytelling and just the authenticity that you're bringing with this back and forth. I think is really has a lot of value these days because there's a lot of inauthenticity today.
Yeah.
And I think anything that does come with authentic has a lot of value.
Yeah, well, man, we could jump into that and we could probably talk a full episode just on all of the social media posts that we see out there, the perfectionism that's happening. Golly, that's a huge, huge topic. So I appreciate you saying that. But, as we get to know you, we started off this way every time when we meet in the elevator, just for the audience sake, and you've got 30 seconds. Who are you? And it's not really about what you do. It's really, how do you identify? So who are you as a person?
I mean, through and through, I'm a language guy. I am in love with language, English in particular, but I'm a writer and an editor of many, many, many years, a reader of pretty much lifetime. And so I really, my entire world revolves around communication, language, storytelling. But as of 5 years ago, I also happen to be the founder of an IT company, even though 10 years ago I knew next to nothing about IT and the internet. So we can get into that a little bit later, but that's really part of my arc. And yeah, I picked a hell of a midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis to found an IT company.
I decided to found
Awesome.
an IT company.
Well, that's definitely unique. But as we typically start to talk about what are some of the beliefs that we formed as a child or in our childhood. And in many of the conversations that we have, we often look at it and say, sometimes it was somebody that spoke directly into our lives, a loved one or a respected individual that said, you can only live this way. Sometimes it was an example. Sometimes it was social pressure to be and act and operate in a certain manner. So with your life, what was that like? What were some of the beliefs and some of the foundational core aspects, I guess we could call them values, that you just adopted as a child, thinking that that's how you were going to live your life? And you can start anywhere, share wherever you'd like. And we've had all kinds of stuff. So I'm excited to hear where you're going to go.
Yeah, I think in general, I bought into the narrative that everyone does, and it's really like I've heard you talk about the false narrative, and it's really kind of the false narrative of this country, to be honest, and that is like that there's a method and a process and a path, and this is how you succeed. You go through school and you go to college and you get a job and you get married and then you buy a house and blah 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 blah. And so, I think a lot of us get kind of sucked into that. My parents were also very much products of the 50s, and so very very much conservative, and they wholeheartedly bought into that is the way that you do things. I mean, this is the generation that sticks with one job for the lifetime, and that's clearly no longer the case these days. I was kind of born in a generation that was between that. I was born in '78, so very fortunate time to be born, because my kindergarten class had some of the first Mac computers, and so I was introduced to computers and was able to get accustomed to them at an early age, but was not so saturated with them that I later rejected them in life. I was just comfortable with them. But I was also kind of too smart for my own good, and very, very precocious. And I kind of rejected the system and the man. And I dropped out of high school. It was a real pain in the ass for my parents. Smoking weed, drinking. All my friends and I, we were very professional drinkers, alcoholics by the time we were 17.
Mm.
Um, like I said, I dropped out of high school, and then I didn't even return to or go to college until I finally got my GED, and then I didn't end up starting college until I was 26. Graduated right before I turned 30. Um, so I was kind of, I knew it and I could see through it, and I was too smart for it, and I kind of rejected it, and then eventually I bought back into it. And
So this is really interesting. You stated that the narrative that was basically placed in front of you, the path that you were supposed to walk. And we're about the same age, so I'm like fully resonating with what you're saying about that whole false narrative of success, where you stay with one job and you go to college and all of that stuff, because I felt that very, very much so in my own life. Your path, though, once that was placed in front of you, like you said, you were too smart for your own good, and so you almost immediately rebelled from that narrative that was placed in front of you to the opposite extreme of, I'm going to live my own life, almost back to the 60 hippie kind of era, where it's just the drinking and the weed and everything's free to go. So what was going on in your brain? Like, what was, again, you have a narrative there that you were placed in front of, and then you decided to make your own narrative. So how did that process kind of go through in your life? Why did you make the decisions you made? Was it, where were you at?
well, you phrase it in an interesting way when you said, "Where was your brain at?" And I think that my brain was working overtime. Uh, I was the first kid in my kindergarten class to read. I was reading books to the other students in my kindergarten class. Like I was reading the New Yorker in high school. Um, so I rejected the system, but I also, like, I continued to embrace my smarts, and like to a certain extent, I felt myself out of place, like too ahead of my time. I mean, we're hanging out, drinking, smoking weed, and then like I'll reference like a New Yorker article that I just wrote about like whoever, and immediately, I mean, everyone glazes over because they're like, "All right, Geof, like whatever you're talking about, your intellectual bullshit." And so I think I got into the drugs and the rejecting and the drinking to shut down my brain, because it really, it's always churning. Like
Mm.
I'm like an idea guy, and I mean I overthink things, I second guess myself, um, and we can kind of get into it later, but I think that I was always living my narrative. I just didn't realize it. Um, and I didn't have anything to apply that overactive brain to.
Mm.
I kept looking for things. I worked in the kitchens, and I was going to be a chef at some point, and then um, I fell into writing at an early age, and then I got an opportunity to write book reviews for the local paper. So then I was going to be a writer, and like so I started throwing myself at all these things, but none of it really stuck, until this recent opportunity when I became the founder of an IT company. And even though it didn't appear outwardly that I was appropriate for the position, it turned out that a lot of the skill set that I need in this role, I was developing throughout my life, like unbeknownst to me, preparing myself for what now feels like an ideal role for all of these experiences that I've developed, and the skill sets that I've built up. It's a really eerie feeling to be frustrated and feel like I don't have a path, and then all of a sudden you find one, and it's like,
Mm.
holy cow, everything I've been doing throughout my life was preparing me for this role that I would have never expected myself to be in. I mean, if you told me 10 years ago that I was going to be in sales and technology and business, I would have been like, yeah, right. Like, I can't stand all those things.
Mm.
Um, and now I'm very comfortable sitting in a boardroom talking with CTOs, CFOs, CIOs, you name it. despite my lack of experience and my technical acumen and all that. So it's
So the question that's rattling in my brain is, as you're talking about your life and as you're talking about the process, and you've got some embracing, some rejecting. To me, it sounds like it was more of a search. It was more of trying to figure out what was going to work for Geof compared to what somebody else was telling you on the outside, your parents or society, or even the friends that you were hanging out. Um, it seems like there was a lot of just different connections there, and the differences as far as just how to be able to search for things.
yeah, and it's all like I told you, I was a writer and an editor, and I am, but I'm really kind of like I'm like an editor of life in general. Like I have great appreciation for quality, process, um, doing it right the first time, every time. Um, and so I've always sought to correct things and to recognize inefficiencies and that there's always a better way to do things. And so that's kind of like the editor in me that comes out in more ways than one, than just on the page and with words. Um, but yeah, I kept looking for things and kept throwing myself at things, and even though it didn't feel like it was right for me, like completely, I nonetheless took from these different ventures. You know, like I love to cook to this day. I just don't want to do it for a living. I don't want to be a chef. You know, and I got a journalism degree in college, but I have no interest, and I never did, in wanting to be a daily newspaper writer. Maybe a magazine writer, like for the New Yorker. I mean, even though that's kind of a pipe dream. Maybe at some point I'll get something, but I'm much more of an editor than a writer.
Mm.
I excel at improving the writing of others, and again, I have great appreciation for language and the craft of writing, and I love absorbing it. Um, but I don't think I'm destined to be a professional writer. I've got a couple books in me, but um,
It's just
I just have a love of process in the
yeah.
world and language.
I think what you're saying is what many people feel, and you've expressed it pretty well, for in my opinion. The aspect that we're all searching for something, and that we're all looking for that purpose, and we're trying to figure out what is, and this is the whole purpose of the podcast, is the narrative aspect and finding what that true narrative is. And it's interesting how you've expressed you pretty much were going through that process, and whether you recognized it externally or consciously, you were still doing that search for, okay, how am I going to define my life? How am I going to write my narrative? So in that search, you obviously, there were things that you knew probably weren't healthy. I mean, just frankly, the drugs, the alcohol, that's not healthy. That's not going to get you to that next step, right? So was there a time when you were able to consciously shift your brain from the world perspective and say, and you mentioned this earlier too, about, I actually did come back and start embracing some of the schooling and some of the education and some of the other parts of this. Was there something that happened, a circumstance, a life experience, or something that made you want to shift that? The reason why I ask is there's a lot of people in the world that have just never gone away from the drugs. They just go deeper into the drugs, or deeper into the alcohol, or deeper into that, and they just chose that. Just as you said, it's a mind numbing kind of a thing to kind of make things relax, and then they become super addicted, and then there's a lot of challenges there. So
Yeah.
how did you escape that, one? And then two is, what was the perspective shift, or when did that happen?
So I think I started taking myself seriously and developing confidence that I didn't have at a younger age. When I got that first opportunity to write book reviews for the local paper, the Daily Camera here in Boulder,
Mm-hmm.
and the first book review that I wrote um, got published like essentially untouched, and the guy gave me compliments, really good work, Geof, and consistently after that I kept turning things into him, and he would basically published them like very lately edited, and so it was like getting that recognition, that feedback from the professional world, that really kind of made me like wisen up and be like, oh, maybe I'm onto something here.
Mm.
Um, now the drugs and the alcohol, I got more than 4 years now. Haven't had a drink. Very proud of that. Best thing I've ever done for myself. I'm not a program guy, anything like that. There's no X on a calendar. I couldn't tell you last drink I had or when I had it. I'm just over it. But that was only recently, and in large part because of this opportunity to found this IT company. But it really started after I graduated from Metro State in Denver, and I worked for the Associated Press for a little bit for the Democratic National Convention, and then I got some work offered by them after that, and so I made a few bucks, and I bought a ticket to Southeast Asia, and so I traveled for about 4 months after college, and it was really seeing the rest of the planet and other cultures that kind
Wow.
of woke me up to just the possibilities, and it just made me knuckle down and got me a little bit more serious about life.
So, what did you experience with that travel? I mean, that's an experience that probably, and I've heard this before, it completely changes your world perspective, potentially changing the trajectory of your life, which is what it sounds like. So, what happened within that traveling time that really cracked you in the head with the 2x4?
So a big part of it was just meeting a variety of different people from around the world, other travelers.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it was this kind of very interesting realization. When I was first going there, it was like, holy cow, what is it going to be like? Expecting just this disruptive experience, and really, what I was struck by was how similar things were. Not how different they were, but really like how common every average day human's life is, like around the planet. We all care about food and family and people, and just so it wasn't so much the dramatic differences between culture, of which there is. It was more striking the similarities, and that just it really attracted to me, and I'm still drawn to the rest of the planet. I find the rest of the planet much more interesting than this country. No offense to the United States and Colorado, but um, the rest of the planet is fascinating, and I feel bad for anyone that doesn't want to go and visit anywhere else because they're happy where they are. I would say that you're really missing out, because the world is a fascinating place.
Mm. Yeah, I truly, truly is. What would be the biggest thing in that seeing the similarities? What would be the biggest lesson that you would say, this is what I took away from that? Because if everybody's the same and everybody's so similar, what impression did it have? How did that start to form the way that you're living then after the traveling?
I think it made me realize that I could fit in anywhere on the rest of the planet. And not that I traveled the entire world. There's definitely countries and continents that I haven't been on. But because of those similarities, and again, culturally, very different. There's nothing similar to Thailand in the United States, or Laos, or Cambodia, or Vietnam, or anything like that. But just the underlying concerns, that we're all looking for food security and love and friendship. It just kind of made me realize that my skill set could fit in, despite cultural differences, and learning other languages also made me appreciate English in a different way. And when I started teaching English in Vietnam on my second trip back to that side of the planet, it really made me learn things about my own language that I hadn't even realized, because here I am now trying to teach aspects about it to 6, 8, 20-year-old adult people.
Mm.
And so that was a very enlightening wake up call, and a good learning lesson about my own language that I love.
Yeah. Well, and being an editor too, I'm sure you've had a deeper understanding of the language, and then to even have that much deeper of understanding, because now you got to teach something. They often say when you teach, you learn more. You actually have to understand the material so much deeper just to be able to transfer it.
For sure. I mean, I
Yeah.
gained a deep appreciation for teaching in general.
Mm.
I figured I could teach English because I love English. Like, sure, I can teach that. And very quickly, I realized that not everyone can teach English, and not everyone can teach, and it made me a deep appreciation for the teachers who are really good. And I'm a decent teacher, but um, my patience wears thin very easily.
I can totally relate with that. I can understand. Was there anything else that was a major shift in the way that you were thinking, whether it was through the travel or maybe even later in life, other experiences that caused you to really look at the world from a different perspective?
Honestly, getting older, the the older I get, the easier it becomes, and I don't mean to, obviously life is difficult and continues to be, and especially these days on the planet. I mean, I don't care where you are, like humanity's up against some real challenges, but just getting older, it's like you know yourself better, and you know uh, what you like and what you don't like, and how to avoid and embrace both of those.
Mm.
Uh, and that's actually my third maxim of life is know yourself. And it's, I mean, it goes bigger than that. We don't have to get into it, but it takes time to know yourself and to learn about yourself. And still to this day, I talk with like 20-year-old college students, and they'll like dispense some nugget of wisdom to me or whatever, and I just, it's like I want to reach out and give them a little pat on the head, like, oh, you'll be all right when you grow up. Like, it's kind of a snarky comment, but I'm fond of saying that you're not a human in my book until you turn 30. No offense to all the younger than 30-year-olds, but um, you know, I'd go back to 30 in a heartbeat, but you couldn't pay me $10 million to go back to 20.
Mm.
No way.
So let's actually dive into that, because you said about knowing yourself, and I think that's really an important aspect of this journey, because you look at the false narratives that society is putting on, whether it's social pressure, parents, doesn't matter. You got a lot of those, and you said that you pretty much rejected that. Then you went into the mind numbingness of the drugs, the alcohol, trying to search and just test different things through your purpose. And you mentioned between the cooking and the chef and the writing. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that you were testing. Is that the journey that you're talking about, becoming and knowing who you are as an individual? Is that what you mean by that? Or can you go a little bit deeper into why you put so much weight upon knowing yourself?
Yeah, I think so. My eighth maxim of life is find the one thing and give it 150%, but be 200% sure it's the one thing.
Mm.
And for me, that has turned out to be this IT venture, which I am like 9,000,000% enthusiastic about and passionate about. But I wouldn't have been ready for it at 20, 21, 30, 31. But it turned out that I was ready for it at 40, 41. And because of all these experiences. And so I just think that I'm a huge fan of learning how to do things the wrong way. I think I think when you do something and you do it right the first time, I don't think that it's the complete lesson. I
Mm.
think when you do something and you do it wrong and it doesn't work and you're like beating your head against the wall, and then you figure it out, it's like it's the holistic lesson, because not only do you learn the right way to do it, but you also learn why that's the right way and why this other way is the wrong way. Whereas like if you figure it out the first time, you're like, sweet, I did it. But then if 10 years down the road it goes wrong and you have to like fix it or something, you don't have that complete knowledge about why the right way is the right way. So
Can you give
I
us an
spent
example
a
of
lot of
something?
my life making a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, can you give us an example of something in there?
Specifically, like, I mean,
I know I'm putting you on the spot, so but that's the
well,
fun of
I
the.
guess the best examples that I can bring are from this whole IT journey. Where my introduction to it was from a former colleague who knew that I had skills translating the English of non-native English speakers into plain English, and he was a part of this IT project, or had stumbled upon it and thought that I would be a good fit for it. And so next thing I knew, I was looking at the English documents written by non-native English speaking techies who didn't give a damn about communications. And um, so, yeah, and I kept pestering and pestering. And the next thing I know, here I have this opportunity to represent this new technology and found a company based on it, and knowing nothing about sales, technology, business. And so the first couple of years, I started running too far, too fast, too soon, and just making a ton of mistakes about
Mm,
fronting myself as if I was a founder and CEO and a technologist. And increasingly, I'm just beginning to realize that's not right. And this goes back to the start of our conversation about authenticity. Um, and so anyone that I talk to about this, I'm very transparent right off the bat about the fact that I'm not a technologist, I'm not a businessman, I'm not a salesman, but I'm passionate about this for XYZ reasons. And
yeah.
I've learned that being authentic and building rapport in that way is much more effective than trying to pretend to be something that I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. So that leads into the way that you're living your life now. And this is a great transition to be able to look at that and say, okay, what are your current values? How do you want to be remembered? And what is that narrative that you're creating to leave behind, in essence?
So I've kind of always wanted to not be famous, but to be part of something big, and to make my mark, and maybe every human feels that way on
Mm-hmm.
some level, that we want to be known for something and remembered for something, and so now I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of financial incentive on the other end of this IT journey, um, and and I'm certainly not going to reject that, but really what gave me the skin in the game and what keeps me improving myself day after day and trying to get better is to be a part of this disruption in the IT industry that this technology represents, and to be a part of that, and to help it be a better movement and a better effort, and to leave my mark in that way, and even if Geof Wollerman is not known, by name as being a part of it, just me being able to look back and realize that I was a part of it, that I used my communication skills and my passion for communicating and orating to be a part of this movement. I think means the most to me, and um, making IT and the internet a better place, simplifying and making it less of a footprint in our daily lives is really kind of my main mission, and especially as the world just keeps accelerating and doubling down with AI and machine learning and blah 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 blah. When I first started this, I was really excited and I was going to take it to the moon, like, oh, I'm going to do this until I die. Um, but like honestly, at this point, I want to do what I need to do and make my mark and get it working for itself. And then I want to build a villa on Bali, and I want to buy a typewriter, and and I want to cook food at a little beachside cabana, and I want to reject like 95% of technology.
Mm. That's really interesting for an IT founder because you're looking at it, and then you even mentioned in there, like, I want to make a smaller footprint from all of the IT that's impacting our lives, and that almost seems counterintuitive. It seems like there's opposing paradigms there.
It is, and like I personally take it to an extreme, but really like what has happened with IT and the internet is that it there was this promise that it was going to make our lives simpler and more efficient, and like we weren't going to need to do blah blah blah. And it turns out like the exact opposite has happened. Uh, it's introduced a ton of complexity into our lives, and just more things that we're having to do and keep track of and blah blah blah, and it hasn't simplified or made anything more efficient. And so the promise, the underlying promise of the technology that we represent and all of my colleagues around the world is to make that footprint less of a footprint. Now, people can take our technology and they can saturate their lives with IT with it if they want. But for a company that doesn't have anything to do with IT, like say Nike, we can make the promise of IT a much smaller footprint, and that's what drives me forward. That's like the editor in me like latches onto that. Like, yes, let's reduce, streamline, get it more efficient.
So this is the $1 million question. How are you taking the values and the things that you learned through your life to find your purpose? And now you're taking a thing, like you just said, and maybe I'm wrong here, but it seems like the world's definition, and you said this way earlier in our conversation, the world's definition of success and how things are going to be, that false narrative, lots of money, lots of fame, and you're literally going the opposite aspect of what we would typically see within society, but yet you're in the tech field. You're in an area or an arena that promotes a lot of that quick cash, hustle all the time, being connected in every moment. Everything that you would think that would be an IT person, everything that you've said up to this point has been almost opposite, almost the exact. And so, where does the value come from? I'm really interested in how you align your personal values and the way that you're approaching. It's a unique approach to IT, to tech, to things that are going on. Walk me through some of that.
So, I mean, again, when I first started down this road with this opportunity, I was very enthusiastic about it, and I still am. But starting out, it was on a different level,
Mm.
and I was gonna do all of it. Like I had this grand vision for what I was going to build, um, and I've never. I mean, if you told me 10 years ago I was going to make $1 million in my lifetime, I would have been thrilled. You know, and now I find myself like considering the prospect of many more millions than that. And I'm not Jeff Bezos. I'm not like these huge, you know, Gates, like whatever rich technologists or non-technologists. Uh, like I don't understand the ethos where you're like, I have $1 billion, but I need more billions. Like
Mm.
I need to amass that. I don't see it, but I see money as a really good tool. So that's also what drives me forward is the opportunity to not only make my mark, but to make enough fuel capital to support other businesses, to buy a massive industrial printing press so that I can like open up my own publishing house. Like, I mean, I've got a number of different ideas that I would use this money for, but I would not amass it.
Mm.
I would not invest it to try and make more of it, except for the purpose of supporting other things. You know, money is a tool, and it's not something to collect and have more of.
Mm.
It's something to put to use. It's really like it's almost like an energy, like I said, like a fuel.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's part of what drives me. But it's, you know, having this prospect of all of this opportunity in front of me has also made me realize that I want, you know, I have two or three books that I want to get written. I would like to have a little beachside cabana with 10 tables and a little simple menu. And so it goes back to the things that I've kind of always loved, which is food and writing and language. And I love to shoot pool. I'm gonna buy the sweetest pool table in the world and have it in my villa. So there's little hobbies and passions that I have. Is just me being human, and those are the things that I'm drawn to, not making billions and living in some high rise, whatever.
Well, and I love that concept because so often, and this is again one of the false narratives, is that people believe that money is going to bring happiness, and that's not the case at all. The money isn't equal. It's the experiences that bring the satisfaction and the enjoyment and the gratefulness. And it's the things that we do with others and with ourselves and the hobbies that bring that. And I love how you just stated that because like you just said, it's not the goal to bring and make and hoard millions of dollars or billions, whichever number. It's how are you using that to give back? And if you were to
making that money can allow you to have those experiences that you just talked about. But yeah, I mean, you said it. Like the money itself does not make you happy, but it may afford you the free time and the ability to pursue things that make you happy. But it's this human connection. It's talking with real people and meeting real people, and that's happiness. That's being human.
Mm-hmm.
Buying things does also not make you
happy. That's a scientific study, and we can go down that road maybe a later day. But yeah, they've proven that buying things is a very short-term happiness compared to creating an experience, and which is so much more longer, elongated as far as within your life. And then you can go back and relive that, but you can't go back and relive the purchase. So yeah, some really, really interesting things. So what do you do on a daily basis? What are some things that you practice in order to maintain yourself so that you don't get burnt out, first of all, and then second of all, to be able to leave that. You mentioned a couple different points that you live by. Do you have a specific list that you use to be able to operate by? Do you have a specific list of values? How do you move forward?
That's actually one of the books that I want to write. The running title is Everything for a Reason, but yeah, I have 9 maxims for life. Now, I started developing them, just like these are solid beliefs that I have, and then I realized, like, holy cow, this could actually be a pretty good book. So number 1 is language is everything. Number 2 is don't try to change people. Number 3 is know yourself. Number 4 is reuse plastic as much as possible. Number 5 is time and space are more important than money and success. Number 6 is fake it till you make it, but don't bullshit a bullshitter. 7 is love is slippery. That's a very, very short statement, but obviously there's a whole thing to get into there. And then 8 is the one that I mentioned earlier. Find the one thing and give it 150%. But be 200% sure it's the one thing. And then my 9th maxim of life is play by all the rules and then break all the rules.
So is there a story behind creating these? Is there something that you discovered this along the way and you slowly started building them? How did these come about? Great points, by the way. But
they kind of came together as I was when I went back to Southeast Asia the second time. I ended up living in Vietnam for about 5 years. And I just got back like about 5 years ago. And so they started kind of coming together in my mind then. And that's really when I had the idea, like, oh, this could actually be a book, like basically each chapter would be about each maxim. And then based on my life experiences that helped me develop it. Now, the 8th one is really resonant with this current IT opportunity. Because that colleague that I mentioned who reached out to me and was like, hey, you should be a part of this. I met him in the middle of the Singapore airport on my way to Bali at 2:00 in the morning, randomly, like completely randomly. And so like if I hadn't bumped into this Frenchman, at 2 o'clock in the morning at the Singapore airport. And then he reached out to me 6 years later about this thing that he thought I should be a part of. Um, I would have no clue about any of this, and I would be on the outside looking in. And so
Hmm.
that kind of goes back to the title of the book, Everything for a Reason.
Hmm.
And I don't, it's not a fate thing. It's more like things happen to us, good and bad. And sometimes it's hard to realize why in the moment.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
maybe it even takes a couple of years or 10 years. But eventually you can like go and draw it back. Um, and even not meaning that Frenchman, but I could go back and draw all the connections to the things that landed me in Southeast Asia the first time and then the second time. And none of that would have steered me to meet this guy in the Singapore airport at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Hmm.
And so, um, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's just one of the books.
Well, but that's, I mean, I love the concept and I love how you expressed it. It shows about one, living in the moment and being able to be grateful for what things are, whether they're good or bad. Because, like you just said, it all basically kind of starts to weave together. And there's a lot of uh, things that we skip because we've chosen to live in our old emotions rather than trying to find what good has come out of that. So, really, really awesome points there. What would be the one thing out of everything that we've talked about? And I know there's probably stuff that we skipped over, but what would be the one thing you would want to leave somebody with? Whether it would be if you're thinking back and telling yourself, because you said that whole thing about 30. So if the guy's 29, maybe you want to talk to the 29-year-old. But what would be the one thing you want to leave for the audience and saying, don't forget this or don't miss this?
I guess that there's time. I think a lot of people get caught up in this false sense of being rushed to like need to figure it out and to get going, achieving whatever you think it is that you need to achieve. But there really is time in life. I mean, it is fleeting. We're here for a blink of an eye, but there's so much great time to enjoy and what's that saying about life is what happens when you're busy uh, waiting for or something. You know what I'm talking? What
I
is
know
that
I don't know
saying?
the statement, but I understand where you're going with that, and I can't remember exactly. It's life happens when we're the busiest. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but yeah,
Yeah, and I think post pandemic too. The pandemic was very interesting in that we all got some time off to really reevaluate our lives and what was important to us and reprioritizing. I saw artists going back to their art and people going back to their families and so I think we're in the middle of a lot of challenges here on this planet. And I don't even know if we've seen the worst of it, but I do think that we're going to be better humans on the other end of it. And
mm,
I think that humans have a real opportunity to make different choices and to live in a better way and to um, yeah, I'm silver linings about the whole thing, and
yeah,
I would just encourage everyone to take their time and enjoy life and don't forget about just living.
yeah,
Um, Stop
yeah.
and smell the roses.
I
Just
was
stop
just
and
thinking that, and I didn't. It was like such the main. I was like, do I want to say that or not? But I literally thought that exact same thing. It's just you got to take time to smell the roses. Oh, that's funny.
or
That's awesome.
stop and eat the foie gras, or you know, do things that are very tiny and minute on a daily basis in your life that don't seem important or consequential, but like that's the real stuff. I mean, talk to a stranger on the street and find out what their story is. In the same way that you talk to people that you don't know. I mean, you and I didn't know each other from Adam a year ago, and
Hmm.
and now here we are. I don't even know your story. Now you got me curious about your story. You're asking everybody all their stories, but I mean, take the
Everybody
time.
has one.
Yeah,
Yep, everybody has one.
humans
So
are social creatures.
yep. Yeah. So, how can people get in contact with you? What's the best way to make contact? I mean, you talked a lot about the tech company. We didn't actually say what the tech company was, so there's probably curiosity of like, what's going on? What's changed in the world? So, how can people find you, get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to my company's website. I'd love to. I'd love to talk about it with anybody if it piques your interest. It's truenodetech.com. That's TrueNode.com. tech.com, truenodetech.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. My name is Geof Wollerman, Geof with one F, Wollerman. You can also link to my company's LinkedIn page there. And yeah, if you can find me and track me down, and my email address and my phone number is on my company's website, and I'd be happy to chat with anyone who is more curious about what we're up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll get that all in the show notes. We'll make sure that if you are listening and you missed it, if you didn't hit the rewind button, by all means, we'll have those things in the show notes. So please check those out. That way you can get connected directly with Geof. Geof, again, man, thanks. This has actually been an interesting conversation. I actually love where you're going. I feel I resonate with a lot of the things that you were saying. we lived in similar times, growing up in the same type of pressure with the schools and the computer. I mean, like I just was like, yeah, that's me. So thank you so much for being with us. Anything else you want to say real quick before we sign off?
I'm just pleased to have been invited and honored, and always happy to tell my story. And like I said at the beginning, I really appreciate what you're doing and asking people and getting these stories out of people, because I think it's really important to share narratives, and in sharing it also gives people a better sense of their own narrative, and makes them think about it in a way that they haven't thought about before. So yeah.
I love that you said that. That I have heard that so often. So if you are interested in sharing, I actually just lead with this. If you're interested in sharing your story, please get in contact with me. You can find us at narrative.live. You can send an email. You can get in touch with me based on the social channels and whichever, but love to hear more stories. And as we close this out, again, I say this every week, but I know this because I talk to these individuals. If something changes your life, if something leaves an impact, please contact us, reach out, whether it's an email, message, however it is. And even if you just reach out to Geof directly, I'm totally cool with that, because, again, it's just why we do what we do. We share our stories to leave an impact and encourage and strengthen people and support people wherever they're at. So please reach out to us, because that's really why we do what we do. So until next time, keep writing, keep crafting your narrative, because everybody's story is important. Everybody's narrative is needed, and we want to hear more about you.
Thanks a lot, Tim.